Hi, thank you for joining us this evening. Tonight we're going to be talking with Jody Hurt. Jody is running to be a member of the Jefferson County School Board. Is that right, Jody? Yeah, I'm just messing with you. That's not really Jody. That's just a picture of Jody. Here's Jody. Let's get rid of the image of Jody and bring on, whoopsie. Now I'm just juggling. Aha, ha, ha, ha. I told you I had a guest. I didn't think I could make friends and have a guest. Go ahead.
I'm often just a picture.
Yeah. Well, you're here because you're running for a seat on the Jefferson County School Board. Is that right?
Yes, indeed. The District 2.
And what's your policy on tardiness, Mr. Hurt?
I will can I plead the fifth as a candidate? But we have coffee, if I could find it. I sat down with coffee, and it seems to have disappeared. No, hang on.
Okay.
No.
Okay.
I do have coffee for the 9 p.m. show.
Well, if I'm always drinking it. I don't know if you ever watch, but I'm always drinking it, and it's kind of because if you're doing stuff all day, you kind of, at the end of the day, you still need it to keep going. So I saw you referenced a TED video on your Facebook page, and let me throw out a link to your Facebook page so that people can find it. I'll put that in the comments. But in your Facebook page, you link to a TED video I haven't got around to watching. Mm-hmm. And I don't know how, because as soon as I see the title, I'm like, I have to watch that. Do schools kill creativity?
Exactly. That's it's the most watched TED video. Think of all of them. It was a viral TED video.
All right. Well, spoiler alert. I'm going to get Jody to go ahead and tell us the ending. Do they kill creativity?
Vehemently.
Vehemently.
Indubitably. Other words. Yes.
Right.
So Ken Robinson just passed away, and he spent his career learning about creativity and how it what the connection to school is, and he was often to say, we tend to educate students from the ground up and then slightly to one side, right? Get everything that's not important out of them.
Right.
We tell stories like there's a grammar school teacher was going around. She told the class to draw a picture, and she walks around to a student and she said, "So what are you drawing?" And the little girl says, "I'm drawing God." And he's like, "Oh, but nobody knows what God looks like." The little girl's like, "Well, soon they will."
Soon they will. That's awesome.
So they'll just have to go.
I noticed you had a French horn in your profile photo.
Yes.
So
I also actually have it in front of me.
Okay. So do you play or just pose with it?
I do play the French horn. I've been playing for 25 years at this point.
And you're a design strategist at Refined Consulting?
Yeah, Refinery Consulting.
I was close.
Yeah. I'm helping professional service providers find their best clients.
Right.
So rather than just a client,
right.
Client who has the right personality for them, the person who the person who wants to do the kind of work they're doing is in the same kind of headspace, just to make it the idea that in the service economy, you are at the service in many ways.
Right. So I'm going to kind of switch our photo for just a second so that people can see all the books behind me, because I want to comment on something with this creativity thing. I'm an engineer.
Okay.
And
in which field?
Software.
Okay.
So I also studied electrical engineering and physics. And in software, I'm self-taught. And that very much has to do with, education being kind of a killer of creativity. And I dropped out. I dropped out with like 100 credit hours in electrical engineering and physics and then went software. And I think so many people think, musician, design, creative, and then, engineering, analytical. And it's not really true.
No.
I mean, just about everything you do in life, you need to be able to think laterally. You need to be able to turn it and look at it at a different angle. And that's where the real magic happens in engineering, is when you're a person who's looked at this and looked at this and looked at this, and you can put them together in a new way. And that's called synthesis. And you have to be creative to be able to synthesize. So I know that's a bit of a tangent I drug you on, but I'm afraid viewers will watch and go, creativity, well, we need engineers. Yes, you do. And that's why you can't afford to kill their creativity. You can't have good engineers who aren't creative.
Sure. Absolutely. So my background, I studied mechanical engineering for 3.5 years after having received an advanced degree in music.
There you go.
I realized that I didn't want to spend the rest of my life doing symphony orchestra stuff. And symphony orchestra, like when I was going out to my friends saying, okay, I know I want to work that's project-based, I want to do work that is creative, that is analytical, they said, oh, be an engineer. So I was going to go design concert halls.
Okay.
Decided to do, what I'm doing now instead. But yes, absolutely. The recent research in cognition has suggested ways of, like, the ways that we actually have ideas are some version of breaking, blending, or what is it? 3 Bs. Break, blend, and of course I'm pulling the Rick Perry, so I'm forgetting the third one.
I don't know this model. Can't help you.
Sure. It's bending an idea, blending 2 ideas, or
break, bend, and blend.
Yeah. So some version of that is how we actually have new ideas. And people who are creative individuals just do that more often.
Right.
And the education system that we have received from Prussia, nobody talks about this, but was designed to do that. It was designed to eliminate any thinking, because there was this the form follows function movement in the 60s. But really, if you look at the what we are doing with our school system, what's the point of our school system? In the 50s and 30s in the United States, they would talk about creating citizens. Right? There was all this propaganda built about it, but nothing changed. What it really was to create labor for capital.
Exactly.
100 years before that, it was to create military leaders. Right? So many of the problems that we face today are not they're not just because of people who, like, it's not just economic problems. It's not redlining. It's yes, all of those things are involved. Absolutely.
Right.
But it's fitting them into a system that was not designed for them to begin with.
Right.
Is a problem.
My friends, they're starved for talent. I mean, even a month ago, it's like, hey, Rob, you done with playing campaign yet? We need some people to fill these gaps.
Absolutely. We all have creative desire. Everybody has a desire to do some kind of work that they have connection to create in some way.
Right.
Not to say that everybody wants to create a symphony or paint, but everybody has. No, but just work of meaningful value to you is creative in some way.
Absolutely. And
that is what that again, you got to watch these Ken Robinson videos. It beats the hell out of it, right? It's what is it called when you collaborate with your friends on a test in school? That's cheating.
Cheating.
What is it called everywhere else?
Collaboration.
That's called the workplace. That's just how life
Yeah.
works, right?
Yeah.
So why in the world are we testing individuals when that's never how things happen afterwards? Why are there right and wrong answers primarily in a world where all of the facts in the world are at your fingertips in the guise of a phone?
Right.
Right. So
that's one of my favorite interviews ever. There's an ex-CTO of Cap One Enterprises, and I was one of the interviewers, and the interviewee was sitting there, and the ex-CTO asked this very technical question that you'd find at the end of a chapter of a book. This was a habit of his. And the interviewee goes, well, the first thing I would do is I would Google it. And we're all like, that's right, you would Google it. He was hired. I mean, it sounds dumb. There was more to the interview than that. Don't get me wrong. You don't get to go into one of these interviews and just go Google it and you're hired. But yes, that's how we work.
Yeah, and many of these questions resonate, I think, very well with people in the liberty community, because we are so attuned to any sense of indoctrination, right?
Absolutely.
If it has the slightest smell of indoctrination, we get it fast, right? Our BS sensor goes off way before anybody else's.
Right.
So, when we hear like school choice and a lot of the things that people are talking about, well, that's those are different conversations that can be had. But when we get to really what school is, that's a conversation that we should be leading in.
Right.
Because whether it's a parochial school, whether it's a religious school, whether it's a private school for alternative means, whatever it is, there has to be a point to the education. And to be fair, private schools follow public education when it comes to what school it's for.
Right.
Because all of the education, like all of the innovators, they've all been happening in the school system. Now that has collapsed over the last 30 years due to testing and like generalization, but the innovations are still there in the public system. And people who are vested in discussions about liberty and getting rid of this sense of propaganda and what Americanness, which is fine, but that's not what it
Right.
Better way to put it is that the question of what it means to go to school, right? So I think this is a very good place for us to be leading the conversation.
I'm sorry, you're a little muffled there. Say that again.
Well, I'm sorry. I was thinking this is a great place for us to be leading the conversation.
Yes, absolutely.
In just what it means to have it. Like, what do we want out of education? I think that. So, well, how about you know your audience very well.
I don't know. Who's tuned in? Chime in. Let me know who's out there.
We're sort of divergent thinkers, right?
Absolutely.
Right. So,
which, by the way, back to the conversation of collaboration.
Yeah.
That's what really makes a good team. People talk about building diverse teams, and I'm like, yes, absolutely. And I might upset some people with this description a little bit, but if you get 4 people who are two different genders, 4 different skin tones, who grew up on the same block in the same city, went to the same school, same everything, you're not really going to end up with diversity. It's like that's the least interesting form of diversity.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm my story is I'm from Prestonsburg, Kentucky, actually where I am right now because I'm here taking care of my mom.
Okay.
So I'm from Prestonsburg, Kentucky, which is
now I know my audience, by the way, if they chimed in.
I'm in Floyd County, Kentucky, which is way over in the eastern part of the state.
Okay.
I was in the system that was the first in the state of Kentucky to be taken over by the state. It was placed in receivership and controlled by Frankfurt.
Okay.
Which is the driver for my campaign in Louisville, and like that's the first and foremost thing that I'm putting out there is this sense that we may not want we may not want the people in control right now, but we sure as hell don't want somebody in Frankfurt running it.
Right.
Because it could, and like, the story was that, and I was a junior in high school, so I remember this pretty clearly. The superintendent was fired, a new person was brought in, and the poor man had a heart attack and died 2 weeks later. That's how bad the system was.
Hey, I have a question, audience question for you. Now we're really getting to know our audience.
Awesome.
So added vocational training in local schools, or more higher education goal oriented? What sort of vision do you have in mind here?
Sure. So that gets to the question of what does it mean to have an education?
Right.
It seems like to me one of the main goals of education is to teach people how to learn for themselves, right? On a level where we look at the society and say, okay, who's here? What can we help people with? I also think that soft skills is something that we should be helping students develop. Which, to put a name to them, we should be helping people develop patience, communication skills, conflict resolution. So a number of things that may or may not be present at home, right? Just because
I wanted to touch on this. Education, the process of receiving or giving systematic instruction, especially at school or university. And, I actually choke on systematic a little bit.
Yeah, I think we could move further and further away from that word in that, right?
Right.
I think there's
immediately where you went is the first thing we need to educate people on is how to not need education, how they can go be learned on their own.
Yeah. Because
that's
precisely. There was an episode of so I listened to hundreds of podcasts. One of the early Freakonomics episodes began with why is a school like a bad radio station? Because you just keep getting the same kind of thing over and over.
Right.
Whereas generally you would like to have options of criteria or curriculum in the system. And this is one of the things that I say regarding public schools is that, let's see, this person's very interested in vocational training in local schools or higher education, and I will get there.
Yep. I know you're going there. Go ahead.
In Kentucky, since 1992, we've had local control of all of our schools. The site-based decision-making councils, or SBDM, is the strongest body for local schools in the entire country. Nobody comes close to having local control like Kentucky does. Generally, these are being used as mouthpieces for the principal. In some instances, like Atherton High School in Louisville, they've expanded the board to 15 people or thereabouts, and they've increased stakeholder ownership of the school, and increased involvement. And they've changed their curriculum to be, sort of an Atherton thing. This is where Kentucky should be leading, and where Louisville, with our, many dozens of schools, could not be just be leading, but could be like putting people to shame in our offerings, by not just having slightly different versions of the cookie cutter presentation, but why not have a school that happens in Chinese, right? Like the entire school, just that's a Chinese school. It doesn't matter whether there are Chinese people there or not, but or a school where, maybe we're doing everything online and you come to school once a week, right? Just the entire offerings could be very, very different. because schools make decisions on curriculum, not the board.
Right.
The state and not the board. The board impresses upon the schools what they need to do, and the state wields a tax or money benefit over those schools and tries to smack them with a ruler. But in reality, it's the schools that make the decisions for their own curriculum, and that is not being emphasized in our public discourse anywhere near enough.
So you might not put it this way, but the answer I heard to Brandon's question is, who am I to decide?
That's exactly it. It's when we talk about these marketplace kind of things, we know that there's a school over near Iroquois. Is it Iroquois High School or Shawnee High School? Maybe Iroquois High School. That has a it's in Louisville. They have an entire mechanics vocational program. Like you can go through the program and you can learn car mechanics inside and out. There's no reason that kind of idea couldn't happen other places, or that couldn't be the school, right? It's not just that could, that there are some people who kind of go through this program. Central High School is one of the most innovative schools in the district, because the principal, Raymond Green, is a former musician, and everybody in the school is a part of some kind of magnet, whether it be entrepreneurship or there's an entrepreneurship magnet, there's a hacker space magnet, there's a Montessori magnet. It's the only Montessori high school in the state of Kentucky at Central High School within the building.
Interesting.
And again, every school could be doing these sorts of things, but we often have just like, oh, I'm going to go to this version of vanilla or this one of vanilla, right? And it's especially bad outside of Louisville, where counties have their one school. That's, the consolidation movement in the 90s was everywhere. You have the one school per county thing, that where you just have, there's no choices in those places. But in Louisville, we have, probably, I should know the number, but I'm really bad at this with them. So at least 10, if not maybe twice the number of high schools. That could be, they could be offering very different kinds of things. Rather than the two that anybody might know are like manual and male, and they aren't substantively different.
Right. Now, my district's a fairly rural district. I mean, I have Owensboro, E-Town, Bowling Green, but I grew up in Boyle County. Closest. Yeah. Well, around Danville.
Prestonsburg is a big football town, so
yeah. Well, when I went to Boyle County High School, our football team wasn't so good, but we had a heck of a marching band. So yeah, I played tuba. Actually, I also played trombone. Did a year of drum corps
at the same time, which was very impressive.
Yeah. So
who did you play with drum corps?
Northern Aurora. Northern Aurora, out of Saginaw, Michigan.
Okay.
Yeah, there you go. But anyway, I mean, just logistically, when I was, and maybe not once I had my driver's license, but when you're 13, you're pretty much going to the same school your neighbor is.
Yeah.
And that's sort of going to lock us in with our options of a ag school or a mechanic school, so on and so forth.
Yeah.
But I was sort of hoping with the COVID crisis we would actually open our options further to online education. And I understand certain base things are problematic, but if you want to get mathematics, one of the best places I've seen to learn mathematics is the Khan Academy. Sal Khan is a fabulous math teacher, and he did a lot of their courses, all their early courses, and I guess that was like a decade ago, and I was so excited. And it's kind of caught on, but kind of in a slow evolutionary way, and we're not getting the revolution that you've alluded to on your page. How do How do we instead of bend evolution and instead break revolution?
That's a very good question, and not in the generic "that's a very good question" way. But what we've often seen is administrators who focus on the means of delivery rather than the relationship. And this is another Robinson thing, that education is the relationship between educator and student. That thing that's happening, that's the education. That is education, not the mode, not the way of delivering. That's all, and those are all accidents of the delivery. But you have many administrators who focus on, okay, we are now giving an iPad to every student, and we need the teachers to work through our iPads. I understand there are actually no appropriate apps at the moment for that, but we are going to do it anyway. Right? That kind of thinking has been a bit pervasive in the last 5 years. The Jefferson County's individual problems are less that way because the teachers are pretty empowered in Jefferson County because of the breadth of the system. The problems with tech and delivery are more about like getting out of the way in global. Just stop giving them 10 hours of learning this app. This sort of thing they have to put their lesson plans online for 3 months ahead. This kind of busy work for teachers, right? That's
right.
We need less of that.
Right. And back to what you were saying about the educational system, especially like the one I grew up in, is it was busy work for students.
Yes.
And I got in so much trouble. I mean, my mom would come home from every PTA meeting just crying because they tell me you know how many tiles are in the ceiling because you count each and every one. I'm like, no, I don't count each and every one, Mama. I taught myself how to multiply. It's like. But I mean, that staring in the ceiling. I mean, honestly, I'm not exaggerating. That's where I learned most of my math. Just because it's like, what else are you gonna do?
Sure. And that's the balance that we do, because we're in education. We're dealing with developing people, right? It's not just a person that's getting taller. Their mind's actually growing and becoming a different person. So. The amount of professionalism and like specialization that goes on in a teacher is comparable to electrical engineering physician, right? There's it's widespread profession, and this is another one of my proposals. If we look at physicians or attorneys, they don't have bosses per se. They don't have right, but teachers do. Teachers have layers of bosses, and that just gets in the way. There may be some bad teachers that are sort of on the cusp of tenure who stick around. I know I had one of the worst teachers ever, but we all did. In reality, in year 3, you know whether you're sticking with it or not, because there are lots of ways to teach without being in the education system.
Right.
So if there were a way to let's address the tenure issue and say, you know what, let's take away the waiting for the bus scenario. Where at 3 years you're over halfway, so you just stick with it for an extra couple of years and get tenure. Let's address that, but let's just let the teachers do their thing. Let's get rid of some administration or a lot of administration, and centralize that part of schooling.
Right.
When you have 100 schools, you don't need 150. Principals. You don't need, certainly not 200 principals. You might need 90, maybe 50, right? Because they don't actually I'm not downplaying the role of administration. I'm just saying, administrator isn't a role, right? That's
sure.
It's not an informative role.
Well, every time you hear about a merger between companies, what do you hear about? You hear about elimination of redundancies.
Exactly. And
same thing.
One board gets fired, or subsumed into the other. But what you don't keep is 2 CEOs, 2 CFOs, right? These things don't happen.
Right.
But in the corporate world, at least the jobs have meaning. Like the roles tell you what they are. Principal doesn't tell you what it is. Is it a strategic role? Is it a managerial role? Or is it operations? We have no idea because it's just a word, right? So obviously I'm pedantic in the way that I want roles to have meaning, to tell you what they are. So that it's not
Right.
But the best part is that generally, if you can't name what it is, you don't need it at all. Because, if there are 50 teachers in the school, those 50 teachers, they can do their thing. Like, they can come together and make decisions.
Right.
If they want to appoint somebody to lead them, and if they want to pass off some decisions on somebody, there's no reason they couldn't do that if they wanted to.
Right.
But if you can, and this is only important in relation to the fact that we're paying principals 2, 3, and 4 times as much as a teacher, right? Then it becomes, oh wait, let's look at that. Because the biggest.
You mentioned earlier funding coming from the state. In your vision, is funding still coming from the state?
So Kentucky has a couple of Jackson County, I think in particular, a couple of places in Jackson, Kentucky, Breathitt County, maybe Jackson County. A couple of very poor areas in East Kentucky sued the state of Kentucky because the students in the county were receiving 10 cents in the dollar for every dollar being received in not in Oldham County, but maybe Jefferson County at the time. So Kentucky is one of the few states where we have a flat system, where every dollar goes into a single pot and then is distributed per student throughout the state.
Okay.
Sounds fair. It certainly removes one thing that other states have, which is shopping for schools. Right? We don't really have that as much in Kentucky, where you can live across the street from somebody and just the house costs $300,000 more because there's a different district.
Right.
That sort of inequality doesn't happen, and that's a tough one, right? So it seems like if it's going to be there, then it should. I think this is the political way to answer your question. If it's going to be there, yes, and it should be used as effectively as possible. So it shouldn't be. If it's going to be flat, fine. But let's make sure that there's no like hoarding of funds, or there's nobody just right.
Well, I mean that's the thing is if I'm paying for it, then I want to know what I'm paying for is good. And like another thing I saw you reference somewhere is if we want to keep our local control over our schools, we must start building a robust defense now against the coming GOP war on Louisville.
Yeah, that was one of my more incendiary posts.
But okay, so like just a couple of weeks ago, maybe a week ago, I was talking to Take Back Kentucky, and I can't remember the chain of questions. You can actually go watch it if you want, but somebody got to the discussion of, we're not just starting with a clean slate. What about sex ed? And my answer was school choice. I mean that's. But because I don't want to force somebody to send their kids to a school that teaches one way when they want it taught another way, but and you have the same thing with evolution. I mean, I subscribe to what Hayek calls a evolutionary epistemology, which basically means I believe culture and the way we think is evolved the same as biology or anything else. So I'm huge on evolution in that I think it's an important concept. So if I had kids that I was sending to school, absolutely they're going to learn evolution. They're going to learn evolution there. They're going to learn evolution from me. They'll probably learn it from me anyway, so it doesn't really matter. But you get my meaning. When I start paying for education, and it's not just me, it's when we start paying for things, we start wanting to make sure it's good. We want to start making sure it's what we want to be paying for. So how do you have this eclectic mix of things and people still feel like they're getting what they're paying for.
So this ties back to one of the other reasons that I'm running. And 2020, the when I look at the mask mandates,
Yep.
Especially in San Francisco in 1918, but also now, what I see is a failure in PR and a failure to actually communicate what's the problem,
Right.
rather than anything else, right? Because the number of people who know that there's a problem and who will go out and spite their neighbors with that knowledge is, vanishingly small.
Sure.
The number
Nobody wants to kill their neighbor's grandmother.
Right. The number of people who will hear, don't do this or you'll go to jail, and will do it just because is really high. Right?
Right.
I mean, yeah. So, so that's like the tax hike that was passed in the middle of a pandemic had virtually no PR behind it. I don't know if you're aware, there was a property tax hike, and that's like the number one thing in Louisville as far as this race is concerned. The person that I'm running against was the chief component of it. And there was no PR behind it that says, okay, this is why now, this is why it has to be now, this is why it has to be now in the middle of a global pandemic, right? So, like, I'm not necessarily opposed to, like, if everybody wants to vote and say, yeah, we want to raise our taxes, fine, let's do that. But let's not have 7 people decide on their own to vote to raise taxes for people and have nothing but contempt for those who ask why.
Right.
That's kind of what we've been handled. So if we look at the decentralized version of this with schools that can kind of do their own things, well, then we're back to this other question of what is school for? Because if school is not for the delivery of facts, then we're doing it wrong, right? We're not doing it right at all. And then if it's not for the delivery of facts, is it needed? So, there are some very simple questions like that. I'm with you. I think the shutdowns have opened our eyes to many things. Like, we never actually had to go to work to begin with. We could work from home. Sure. Many of our decisions at school were just because we wanted to get the kids out of the house.
Right.
What if the fact that somebody was born in 1980 has less to do with their like where they are in school than all the kind of things that they've put together, like like beer has more in common with like when it was made than people do, right? But for some reason we keep producing them the same way. Like, one has a born-on date, the other one has a graduation year. That's all their cohort.
Right.
The two things, it's nonsense. Especially when early child development is, that's orders of magnitude more complex than anything that we've dealt with in physical in mechanical engineering, right?
Sure.
The kinds of development that's happening. So to think that there's one way to educate a 10-year-old or a 14-year-old, oh my God, is nuts.
Exactly.
Or that we even know what that is, right? Or even better, that we could know, right? Epistemologically, it's a thing.
Right.
So opening that up.
See that? He threw my word back at me.
So opening these things up, the sense of decentralization, of local control, of local stakeholders, it elevates what local communities value. And in outside of Louisville, in the counties, we open, sort of 120 counties in Kentucky, over 140 school districts, breaking down some of those barriers so that somebody can go across lines just because somebody lives in Prestonsburg and they want to go to Paintsville, like Johnson County. there's no reason that shouldn't be able to happen, but it's really quite difficult right now.
Right.
Despite the fact that all the taxes are kind of coming from this umbrella, right? It's very strange. But how do we so there are some other specific kinds of things that we can do, and these are like a higher level than what the board per se would have within its purview, but maybe not. So again, we're looking at look at getting people jobs or enabling them to create work for themselves that they find valuable, right? So that's with the same thing, but I think the second one is a little more worthwhile, because it means that maybe they go volunteer for the rest of their life. Maybe they join the Peace Corps and that's their thing. Maybe they become a dog walker and they're going to walk dogs and make $400,000 a year because that's something you can do, right? People letting people discover these sorts of things as part of education opens up what, especially like 9, 10, 11, 12, what those grades can be. But if we're currently funding 9 through 12, well, what if we could fund 9 through 12 and maybe through 14, or maybe just through 10? If our set of goals of what we want the students to achieve is captured in those goals, right? Without getting into the child prodigy thing where kids finish school at 11, if you talk about a student who is, I'm sure like yourself, capable of completing every school assignment that you were given by sophomore year.
Well, I was a very lopsided person, so like reading, grammar, things like that. I was always very slow. Math, I was always about 6 years ahead, which is crazy painful. I mean, not to just whine about my lot in life or anything, but the idea of having a student, sit there for an hour a day with people who are basically, working 6 years behind them. I mean, what do you think happens? Come on, think this through. Yeah. But at the same time, I mean, other classes were challenging for me.
Yeah. And as an advocate for the arts, that's one of the reasons that now and in Aristotle's day we talked about once like a necessary and sufficient comprehension of things has been reached, then go into the arts, or then go into medicine, or then go into studying the stars, because then these things require a higher level of cognition and an empathy to understand the people around you and what they are dealing with. That's where those sorts of things become very important. Sorry for I keep touching my eye. My allergies have been bothering me like crazy.
Well, the really gorgeous thing about what you're saying is, once you get somebody past their foundation and you start letting them explore what they actually want to do, that's when their own inner motivations kick in. That's when the student, really comes into their own. And I had the privilege, it was just like a 1 week thing, but I taught this little Linux class, and at the beginning of the week, we were so far behind the curriculum because I was going into the basics, the foundations, more than the coursework was. Mm-hmm. And then all of a sudden, like halfway through the week, it's like the rest of the book just fell into place for them. They just had it. And the people at the school told me, students kind of like to leave early on Friday, so you can just give them the second half of the day off. And I'm like, oh, okay. I went back into the class. I'm like, okay, here's the deal. They said I can give you the second half of the day off tomorrow. But as of today, we're actually through all the coursework. We've actually already done everything. So here's what we're going to do. Tomorrow, you bring in whatever it is you want to study, whatever it is you want to explore or learn. We will do that as long as you want for the day, because they're paying me for the whole day anyway. They had to kick us out, of course, but because then you were into what people wanted. That's what they were there for.
Absolutely. Have you heard of the free schools or democratic schools?
Mm-mm.
I think the notorious one is the Free School of Harlem, or the Harlem Free School,
Okay.
or Harlem Democratic. Um, Democratic in that the students actually decide all the rules.
Okay.
They decide what they're going to study, when they're going to study it, everything. So you go to these schools, and the young kids, they're just playing all day, right? So maybe around 4th or 5th grade, the kids decide to start asking the teachers for work. But the students who come out of these programs, in a lateral study, they don't fare any worse, and often at least as well or better than their peers. Because when they were kids, they weren't taught to hate studying, and then when they got older, they were able to actually study the things they were interested in.
Right. I mean, playtime is an intellectual endeavor. It is an exploration.
Yes.
So we are kind of like past the time that people start looking at the length of videos and go, I'm not going to start that. We went too long already. But I want to kick in that you are obviously someone who knows how to bend, blend, and break.
There you go.
So I think I would feel very good about you holding an office on any school district. I mean, you've clearly got a lot of passion about this. You're clearly excited about making sure the next generation is better able to develop their intellect.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, that's what I want out of school. I want people to come out with a better intellect than I have.
Mm-hmm. I'm not going to make a joke.
You can.
You left yourself wide open.
I know.
I will say that.
I know. That can say a lot or say very little. Come on, Rob. We want a higher goal than that. That's okay.
I'm so used to self-deprecating humor that I can't actually make jokes about other people. It's just not right.
I run into that. I run into that all the time. I love self-deprecating humor, and so sometimes I use it on others, and I play a little rough, and they don't know me well enough yet. I'm like, no, it's just that's just me. I don't mean that. So, what do people need to do to help you, man? What do you need?
I think I just glitched out for a second.
I was asking how we can help. What do you need?
So, in the era of COVID, the thing that I would normally do the best is not an option for me, and that is actually meeting people. You get me in a room with 20 people, and I have 20 best friends 10 minutes later. I'm an affable person. People will, they sort of, I'm harmless, right?
Well, of course, because you go with the self-deprecating humor, so you seem harmless.
My last name is Hurt. Nobody can hurt me. I mean, come on. It's too easy. So the thing that I can't do is that, right? So that's the thing that I would normally do. So what I need and what I would need to do for that is two things. One, let people know I exist and that they can trust me, right? So what I need is some help making connections with people in Louisville or in the district, in the Highlands, St. Matthews area, who would be those people to be able to say, oh, this person knows what they're talking about, and this is the person that we want. Just to sort of short circuit that whole process,
right?
To use a non-electrical engineering term for you.
So for one, like, comment, share, because this is on social media to begin with.
Exactly.
That you can do for free. Just like, comment, share, and help push the algorithm. Because even if somebody watches, like tries to target this, somebody's going to be more likely to watch it or pay attention to it if it looks like it's got a lot of play.
Exactly. And when you mention it, you could say, oh yes, it's an hour long, but they basically joke the whole time, and one
Yeah.
guy making fun of them.
It blows right by. It really did. It did for me anyway. I don't know. Maybe you're all napping, but for me, this was a lot of fun.
And like we did, like I have to come back if you'll have me, because there are at least 3 conversations we didn't have.
Okay.
There are at least 3 entire conversations. I think that because one of Louisville's biggest problems is.
Well, don't ruin it. Just give me the conversations.
I'm going to tease it.
Okay, tease it.
I'll tease it. It's the Prussian school system as a function of redlining.
Yep.
Period. That's it.
Oh, that's it. That's okay. I'm curious.
So,
I'm dying to go ahead and say, just go ahead. No, go ahead. We'll wait. Self-restraint. I'm going to pass the marshmallow test here. I bet you know what that is. But that's okay. But
how many marshmallows do you want us more? And it's no.
We'll cover it another time. That's going to be another conversation. Is the marshmallow test?
No, 4. Cool.
All right. This has been a lot of fun.
Absolutely.
Go check out his Facebook page. I linked that earlier. Share this with people you know who are interested in education. I'm certainly passionate about this. We need people who can think.
We've definitely had a lot of topics that, and I think the way that we dealt with them like would be of interest to anybody in liberty space, right? That's because and again, we mentioned it, like we should be leading in this, again, if the local schools get to decide what they're doing, they can decide to stop taxing everybody. There are lots of decisions they can make locally.
Right.
If that's the way that they want to go.
Right. All right. Well, thank you for joining me, sir. This has truly been fun, and we've got 4 more scheduled now. So thanks for joining. Help Jody get this out there. Later, guys.